The first time Heinrich Schmidt heard the distinctive metallic snap echoing through the Normandy hedgerows, he froze mid-step, his breath catching in his throat like ice water. Around him, veterans of the Eastern Front clutched their rifles tighter, their faces draining of color as that sound sliced through the morning mist. They knew what was coming. They had heard the stories whispered in field hospitals and scrawled in desperate letters home. The weapon that turned thick bocage into a slaughterhouse. The gun that made experienced soldiers pray they would face anything else. But what Heinrich could not understand, what none of them could reconcile in those final seconds before the bullets tore through leaves and flesh alike, was why the Americans loved it so much. The answer lay not in propaganda or bravado, but in the cold reality of what happened when two philosophies of warfare collided in the mud and blood of European battlefields.
Das High Command hat spent Jahre perfektioniert Infanteriedoktrin, studieren every detail of small arms tactics, calculating rates of fire und effective ranges mit preußischen Präzision. Their soldiers carried the finest bolt-action rifles in the world, weapons of legendary accuracy that could drop a man at 400 meter. Every Wehrmacht soldier trained endlessly to work his Mauser with mechanical efficiency. 5 rounds loaded, bolt cycled, ejected shell casings spinning in the sunlight. It was a system built on discipline, on making every bullet count, on the code mathematics of aimed fire. Officers drilled their men until the motions became automatic. Shoulder the weapon, acquire the target, squeeze the trigger, work the bolt, find the next target. This cycle had served German armies through 2 world wars, refined across decades of military tradition stretching back to the Franco-Prussian War.
Then the Americans arrived with something that shattered every assumption, a weapon that rendered years of tactical doctrine obsolete in the span of a single firefight. The M1 Garand entered American service in 1936, and from the moment it was issued, it represented a philosophical revolution in how infantry fought. While other nations clung to bolt-action designs that required a soldier to manually chamber each round, breaking his sight picture and rhythm with every shot, the Garand used the expanding gases from a fired cartridge to automatically eject the spent casing and load the next round. This meant an American rifleman could fire 8 rounds as fast as he could pull the trigger, never once moving the weapon from his shoulder, never once losing his target in his sights. The implications were staggering. A single American soldier could maintain sustained fire at a rate that previously required multiple riflemen working in coordinated volleys.
General George Patton would later call it the greatest battle implement ever devised, and German soldiers who faced it learned why through bitter experience measured in blood and terror. The weapon weighed 9.5 pounds empty, stretched 43.6 inches from buttstock to muzzle, and fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge that could punch through light cover and still retain lethal energy. The first encounters came in North Africa, where German troops initially dismissed reports from Italian allies about American firepower. The Italians, after all, had been complaining about everything since the Desert War began, their morale shattered by British offensives and their equipment outdated even by Mediterranean standards. Italian officers filed reports about devastating American rifle fire, about entire squads pinned down by what seemed like light machine gun fire that turned out to be infantrymen with semi-automatic rifles. German intelligence officers read these reports with skepticism, attributing Italian losses to poor training and low motivation rather than superior enemy equipment. But when German units clashed directly with American forces at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, even in that initial German tactical victory, something became clear that would haunt Wehrmacht commanders for the rest of the war. American infantry squads generated a volume of accurate fire that seemed impossible for their numbers. A single squad of 8 men with Garands could put out as many aimed shots in 30 seconds as a German squad of 10 with Mausers could manage in 2 minutes. The mathematical reality was devastating, a force multiplier that turned every American rifleman into the equivalent of 2 or 3 conventionally armed soldiers. What made this firepower truly terrifying was not just the rate of fire, but the psychology it created on both sides of the battle line.
German infantry tactics relied heavily on fire and maneuver, with one element laying down covering fire while another advanced. This worked when both sides had similar rates of fire, when suppression was about making the enemy keep his head down during brief vulnerable moments. Against Garand, those moments of exposure became exponentially more deadly. A German soldier rising to advance faced not one or two carefully aimed shots, but a stream of semi-automatic fire that could walk across his position before he took 3 steps. Veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived Stalingrad and Kursk, men who had learned through brutal experience exactly how to time their movements between enemy shots, reported that American rifle fire felt more like facing multiple machine guns than a line of riflemen.
The sound itself was different, a rapid crack, 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 instead of the spaced reports of bolt-action rifles, a rhythm that eliminated the brief windows of relative safety experienced soldiers depended upon for survival. The psychological impact cut deeper than the physical casualties, though those were severe enough. German training emphasized discipline under fire, the ability to maintain formation and execute tactics even when bullets snapped overhead. But the Garand changed the calculus of courage. When every American rifleman could lay down sustained, accurate fire, when even a small patrol could generate firepower previously associated with larger units, German soldiers found their hard-won experience suddenly obsolete. A lance corporal who had fought across Russia, who knew exactly how long he had between enemy rifle shots to move or return fire, discovered those rhythms meant nothing in France.
The steady crack, crack, crack of Garands created a sound environment that frayed nerves and made veterans question their instincts. Young soldiers, fresh from training centers, arrived at the front with doctrine that no longer matched battlefield reality. Officers found that tactics which had worked against Soviet conscripts or British regulars failed catastrophically against American infantry, resulting in casualties that seemed disproportionate to the forces engaged. Meanwhile, on the American side, soldiers fell in love with their rifles in ways that went beyond mere appreciation of effective tools. The Garand was heavy, weighing nearly 10 pounds fully loaded, and it had quirks that required attention and understanding. The N-block clip system that held 8 rounds would eject with a distinctive ping when empty, a sound that became legendary and controversial in equal measure. Some claimed Germans learned to listen for that ping and attack during the vulnerable reload moment, though actual battlefield evidence for this remains contested among historians and veterans alike. What was not contested was how American soldiers felt carrying a weapon that made them individually more powerful than any other infantryman in the world. Letters home spoke of the confidence the rifle inspired, the sense that while everything else about combat was terrifying and chaotic, at least they had the best weapon. Soldiers gave their rifles names, treated them with care that bordered on reverence, and developed a bond with the weapon that transcended its mechanical nature. Letters home from the European theater overflowed with praise for the rifle, often in language that surprised censors accustomed to complaints about equipment.
Soldiers wrote about the confidence it gave them, knowing they could fire as fast as needed without working a bolt, knowing their buddies on either side had the same capability. Squad tactics evolved around this firepower, with American infantry developing aggressive patrolling and assault techniques that leveraged their per-man superiority. Where a German squad might hesitate to engage a larger force, American squads pushed forward, knowing their Garands multiplied their effective strength. A corporal from Ohio wrote home describing a firefight where his 8-man squad held off a German patrol twice their size. The rapid fire from their Garands convincing the enemy they faced a much larger force. The rifle became a symbol of American industrial and technological superiority, proof that their country could equip every rifleman with what other nations could only give to elite units or machine gunners. For soldiers far from home, facing an enemy with years of combat experience, the Garand provided tangible reassurance that America's industrial might translated into personal battlefield advantage. The mechanical reliability of the Garand contributed enormously to soldier confidence in ways that statistics alone cannot fully capture. Unlike some semi-automatic designs that jammed frequently or required constant maintenance under field conditions, The Garand proved remarkably robust in environments that destroyed lesser weapons. It could be dragged through mud, soaked in rain, frozen in snow, subjected to temperature extremes, and still function when the trigger was pulled. Soldiers learned to field strip and clean their rifles efficiently, and the design was forgiving enough that even hasty maintenance in combat conditions usually sufficed to keep the weapon operational.
This reliability meant soldiers could trust their weapons absolutely, and that trust translated into tactical boldness that German commanders found difficult to counter. An infantryman who knows his rifle will fire every time he pulls the trigger fights differently than one who harbors doubts about his equipment. The Garand eliminated those doubts, creating a feedback loop where reliability bred confidence. Confidence enabled aggressive tactics, and aggressive tactics won firefights. The contrast with German weapons became a source of dark humor among American troops, the kind of gallows comedy that helped soldiers cope with the daily terror of combat. They respected the Mauser rifle for its accuracy and the MG-42 machine gun for its terrifying rate of fire that could saw trees in half. But they knew that German infantry could not match them rifle for rifle in a sustained engagement.
Captured German soldiers often expressed amazement on American equipment, not just the Garands, but the entire logistics system that kept men fed, supplied, and equipped with such abundance. A Wehrmacht soldier might go weeks with worn boots and thin rations, his uniform patched and repatched, his equipment held together with wire and improvisation. But his American counterpart had regular supplies of everything from ammunition to cigarettes to fresh socks. The Garand symbolized this difference, a weapon so advanced and so well made that it embodied the materiel advantage America brought to the war. German prisoners examined captured Garands with a mixture of professional interest and barely concealed envy, understanding immediately why American infantry fought with such confidence. German attempts to counter the Garand's advantage took several forms, none entirely successful in reversing the tactical imbalance.
Some units tried to emphasize their own strengths, using superior tactics and camouflage to offset American firepower. German officers, products of a military tradition that emphasized tactical flexibility and initiative, developed countermeasures based on avoiding direct firefights where American rifle superiority could dominate. They increased reliance on ambush tactics, night operations, and prepared defensive positions that maximized the effectiveness of machine guns and indirect fire while minimizing exposure to American rifle fire. Others pushed for more automatic weapons at the squad level, leading to increased distribution of the MP-40 submachine gun and the STG-44 assault rifle late in the war. But these solutions came too late and in too small numbers to fundamentally change the infantry balance.
Bei der Zeit der deutschen Industrie begannen semi-automatische und automatische Rifle für General Issue, der War war bereits verloren. Faktorenproduktion krippelt bei alliiertem Bombing und Ressourcenshortages, das mehrt even Basic-Ammunition problematisch zu manufakturen in suffizienten Quantitäten. Der taktische Evolution auf beiden Seiten revealt, wie viel eine Single-Waffe Combat-Doktrin und Battlefield-Behalten reshapen kann. Amerikanische Commander developed doctrine that exploited the Garand's capabilities, emphasizing rapid movement and aggressive fire superiority. Infantry training focused on quick target acquisition and rapid aimed fire, turning every rifleman into a force multiplier who could suppress multiple enemy positions. Die Fire- and Maneuver-Tactics, das amerikanische Squads perfektionierten, dependeten entirely auf der Garand's ability to maintain sustained fire, allowing maneuver elements to advance under covering fire that never slackened.
German commanders, meanwhile, adapted their tactics to minimize exposure to American rifle fire, emphasizing night operations where the Garand's advantages diminished, heavy use of fortifications that protected defenders from small arms fire, and reliance on their superior machine guns and indirect fire to level the playing field. The hedgerow fighting in Normandy showed both adaptations at their most extreme, with Germans using terrain to create ambush positions that negated some of the Garand's advantages, while Americans developed combined arms tactics that used their rifle superiority as the base for coordinated assaults involving armor, artillery, and air support. Personal accounts from German prisoners of war consistently mentioned the Garand as a source of fear and respect, often in the same breath.
Interrogation reports noted that captured soldiers often asked to examine the weapon, curious about its mechanism and amazed by its reliability.
Wehrmacht soldiers, trained to appreciate quality engineering, understood immediately that the Garand represented a significant technological achievement. Some admitted they had heard about the semi-automatic rifle before encountering it in battle. Warnings passed through the ranks that American infantry could shoot much faster than expected, stories that seemed like propaganda until proven true by experience. Others learned the hard way, survivors of firefights where their careful aimed fire could not match the storm of lead coming from American positions. The psychological impact of facing superior firepower showed in German casualty reports, with frontline units suffering higher losses in engagements with American infantry than models based on pre-war assumptions predicted.
Medical officers noted that wounds from American rifle fire tended to come in clusters, with soldiers hit multiple times as they tried to maneuver, suggesting the sustained fire capability of American squads was catching Germans in the open more frequently than traditional bolt-action rifles would have allowed. The fame of the Garand spread beyond the soldiers who carried it, becoming part of the American home front's understanding of how their military fought. War correspondents wrote about the rifle. Photographers captured images of GIs with their weapons in iconic poses, and newsreels back home showed the distinctive silhouette of the Garand in action. It became as much a symbol of American military might as the Sherman tank or the B-17 bomber, a piece of equipment that represented technological superiority and industrial capacity translated into battlefield effectiveness. For Americans on the home front, knowing their sons and husbands carried such effective weapons provided comfort, tangible proof that the nation was doing everything possible to bring them home safely. Factory workers who manufactured Garands took pride in their work, understanding that the rifles they produced would protect American soldiers and help win the war. This connection between home front production and battlefield success was part of the larger American war effort's psychological framework, binding together factory, training camp, and battlefield in a shared mission. The engineering behind the Garand's success deserves examination, for it was not simply good fortune that made it work so well under such demanding conditions. John Garand, the Canadian-born designer who worked for the Springfield Armory, spent years perfecting the gas-operated system that powered the rifle through countless iterations and tests. Unlike other semi-automatic designs that used complex mechanisms prone to failure under field conditions, Garand's system was elegantly simple in concept, though demanding in execution. A small hole drilled near the muzzle tapped expanding gases from the fired cartridge, directing them back through a tube to push an operating rod that cycled the action. This design had few moving parts relative to other self-loading rifles, could be manufactured with reasonable precision on standard machinery, and proved remarkably forgiving of variations in ammunition and environmental conditions. The rotating bolt locked into the receiver solidly enough to handle the powerful .30-06 cartridge safely, while the long-stroke gas piston provided reliable operation across a wide range of conditions. Garand's genius lay not in revolutionary new principles, but in the careful refinement of existing concepts into a package that balanced performance, reliability, manufacturability, and maintainability in proportions no previous designer had achieved. The production achievement matched the engineering brilliance, demonstrating American industrial capacity at its peak. Springfield Armory and Winchester manufactured millions of Garands during the war, maintaining quality standards while achieving output levels that would have seemed impossible in peacetime. Workers, many of them women who entered factory jobs for the first time as part of the wartime mobilization, learned to produce the complex machined parts that made up each rifle. The receiver alone required dozens of machining operations, each held to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch to ensure proper function and interchangeability of parts. Quality control inspectors checked dimensions and tested function, ensuring that rifles leaving the factory would perform reliably in the hands of soldiers thousands of miles away, fighting in conditions no factory could replicate.
This combination of smart design and manufacturing excellence created a weapon system that gave American infantry a decisive edge in the ground war, an edge measured not just in tactical victories, but in lives saved through superior equipment. The famous ping of the ejecting clip became part of battlefield folklore, debated endlessly by veterans and historians trying to assess its tactical significance. The sound was unavoidable, a byproduct of the en-bloc clip system that held 8 rounds in a single metal frame that ejected forcefully when the last round was fired. The clip, made of thin, stamped steel, would fly several feet from the rifle with a distinctive metallic ring that was audible in quiet conditions.
Some soldiers worried this advertised their empty rifle to nearby enemies, and stories circulated about tricks to mask the sound or fake it to draw enemy fire. However, combat interviews and after-action reports suggest the tactical significance of the ping was minimal in actual fighting. In the chaos of a firefight, with explosions, machine gun fire, and shouting filling the air, one small metallic sound rarely registered as tactically important. Moreover, the reload time for a Garand was so brief, often under 10 seconds for a trained soldier, that any advantage an enemy might gain from hearing the clip eject vanished almost immediately. The myth of the ping persisted more in imagination than reality, another element of the Garand legend that grew beyond its practical importance. What mattered more than the ping was the sustained firepower American squads could maintain through coordinated fire and movement.
With 8-round clips and soldiers trained to reload quickly, a Garand-equipped squad could lay down suppressive fire far more effectively than equivalent German units. American tactics emphasized keeping the enemy's heads down through sheer volume of fire, allowing maneuver elements to advance while base of fire teams poured rounds downrange. This suppression and movement cycle could repeat multiple times in a single engagement, with roles rotating as soldiers expended ammunition and reloaded. German squad tactics relied more heavily on the MG-42 machine gun for suppression, with riflemen providing flanking fire and protection for the gunner. This meant that if the machine gun was knocked out or its crew killed, a German squad's firepower dropped dramatically. An American squad, by contrast, retained significant capability even after casualties, because every rifleman carried a weapon capable of sustained semi-automatic fire.
The decentralized firepower distribution made American squads more resilient and adaptable, able to maintain combat effectiveness even when reduced in strength or separated from supporting elements. The evolution of small arms doctrine during World War II showed how quickly innovation could shift tactical advantage between armies of roughly equal training and motivation. At the war's beginning, most armies used bolt-action rifles developed in the late 1800s or early 1900s, weapons that reflected pre-mechanized warfare thinking. These rifles had been designed for an era when infantry advanced in tight formations, and victory went to the side that could deliver disciplined volleys of aimed fire.
The Garand represented a leap forward, recognizing that modern combat required higher rates of fire and that individual soldiers needed weapons matching the intensity of mechanized warfare, where engagements happened faster and at closer ranges than pre-war doctrine anticipated. Other nations experimented with similar concepts, with the Soviet Union fielding the SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle and Germany developing the Gewehr 41 and later the Gewehr 43. But only the United States managed to field a reliable semi-automatic rifle as standard infantry issue on a large scale before the war ended. This achievement reflected not just good design, but industrial capacity and logistical capability that allowed America to equip millions of soldiers with sophisticated weapons and keep them supplied with ammunition.
German weapons development tried to catch up throughout the war, producing impressive designs like the Gewehr 43 semi-automatic rifle and the revolutionary STG-44 assault rifle. The STG-44 particularly impressed with its combination of automatic fire capability and intermediate cartridge, a design concept that would influence post-war weapons development worldwide and essentially create the modern assault rifle category. German engineers understood the tactical value of increased firepower at the individual soldier level, and their designs showed technical sophistication that in some ways exceeded the Garand.
But these weapons arrived too late and in too few numbers to impact the war's outcome. By the time German factories began serious production of advanced infantry weapons, Allied bombing had crippled industrial capacity, and raw material shortages limited output to a fraction of what was needed. American factories, safe from bombing and swimming in resources, churned out Garands by the millions, ensuring every infantry division had rifles for every man with spare weapons held in reserve against losses and damage. The maintenance demands of the Garand, while not insignificant, proved manageable in field conditions with the training American soldiers received. Soldiers learned the routine of keeping the gas system clean, checking the operating rod for damage and proper alignment, and ensuring the chamber stayed free of debris that could cause malfunctions. The rifle could function while quite dirty, though accuracy and reliability improved with proper care that kept the gas system clear and the bore clean. This balance between ruggedness and maintainability made the Garand ideal for the harsh realities of combat, where weapons endured conditions no peacetime test could replicate. Rifles were dragged through swamps, frozen in foxholes, dropped from trucks, and used as impromptu clubs in close-quarters fighting, yet they continued functioning when needed. This durability earned soldier loyalty in ways no amount of theoretical superiority could match. A weapon that works when your life depends on it becomes more than equipment. It becomes a trusted companion whose reliability you stake your survival upon. Training American soldiers to maximize the Garand's potential became a priority for the Army as the weapon entered widespread service. Boot camp training emphasized marksmanship fundamentals, with recruits spending hours on ranges learning sight picture, trigger control, and breath control. But unlike earlier eras that focused purely on slow, aimed fire at long ranges, World War II training added rapid fire drills, teaching soldiers to engage multiple targets quickly while maintaining acceptable accuracy. The Garand made this training practical, allowing recruits to develop muscle memory for fast shooting without the interruption of manually working a bolt between shots. By the time soldiers reached combat units, they could lay down effective fire at rates their grandfathers would have found impossible. Advanced training included transition drills, moving between targets, shooting from various positions, and maintaining fire discipline to avoid wasting ammunition. The 8-round capacity required shooters to be conscious of their ammunition expenditure, developing judgment about when rapid fire was warranted and when careful aimed shots were more appropriate. The impact of the Garand extended beyond its immediate tactical advantages on World War II battlefields. It influenced post-war weapons development worldwide, proving that semi-automatic operation was not just feasible but essential for modern infantry rifles. Nations that had resisted moving away from bolt-action designs during the war quickly adopted semi-automatic rifles afterward, with many directly inspired by the Garand's operating system. The Soviet SKS, the British EM-2, and various other designs showed clear influence from Garand's gas-operated rotating bolt system. Even the M14 rifle that eventually replaced the Garand in American service was essentially an evolutionary development of the same basic design, modified to accept a detachable box magazine and capable of selective fire. The Garand's success fundamentally changed military thinking about infantry weapons, establishing principles that still guide small arms design today. Modern assault rifles, from the AK-47 to the M16 and beyond, owe conceptual depths to the Garand's demonstration that individual soldiers needed and could handle increased firepower. For the soldiers who carried Garands through Europe and the Pacific, the rifle was more than a tool or even a superior weapon. It was a companion, a source of confidence, a technological edge that made impossible odds slightly more survivable. Veterans returned home with stories of their rifles, how they performed in crucial moments, how their reliability saved lives when other equipment failed. Many kept their service weapons if allowed, or purchased similar rifles as civilians, unable to let go of the bond formed in combat. The Garand had carried them through the worst moments of their lives and brought them home, and that created a loyalty transcending rational analysis. Veteran organizations held shooting competitions with Garands decades after the war, and collectors sought well-preserved examples with specific serial numbers or manufacturing marks.
The rifle became a tangible connection to experiences that shaped a generation, a physical object that linked present comfort to past sacrifice. The contrast between how Americans and Germans experienced infantry combat in World War II often came down to this single piece of equipment and the tactical advantages it enabled. An American soldier had confidence in his personal firepower, knowing his rifle gave him an edge in any infantry engagement. He could see a target and engage it immediately without the interruption of working a bolt, could shift between multiple threats rapidly, could maintain sustained fire that kept enemies suppressed while his squad maneuvered. A German soldier, no matter how well trained or experienced, knew he faced an enemy who could shoot faster and reload quicker, who could maintain fire superiority through sheer volume, even when outnumbered.
This psychological advantage, combined with the tactical flexibility the Garand enabled, contributed significantly to American success in the ground war. Victory in combat often comes down to which side can maintain effective fire while maneuvering, and the Garand gave American infantry a decisive advantage in that fundamental equation. The question of why American soldiers loved the weapon while Germans feared it most finds its answer in this combination of technical superiority and psychological impact multiplied across thousands of engagements. The Garand represented everything that made American military power formidable: innovative design, excellent engineering, reliable mass production, and comprehensive training that allowed soldiers to exploit the weapon's full potential. It was not perfect, no weapon ever is, but it was extraordinarily good at exactly the mission it was designed for.
The rifle had limitations, including its weight, its limited ammunition capacity compared to later magazine-fed designs, and the difficulty of topping off partially empty clips. But these drawbacks were minor compared to the overwhelming advantage of semi-automatic fire. In the end, that excellence made all the difference between winning and losing firefights, between taking objectives and being pinned down, between coming home and not coming home. The Garand gave American soldiers a tangible reason to believe they could survive and prevail, while German soldiers learned to fear the weapon that made every American rifleman a force multiplier whose individual firepower exceeded anything their doctrine had prepared them to face.
If this story of steel and innovation stayed with you, if you found yourself wondering how a single weapon could shape history so profoundly, leave your thoughts below and continue exploring how human ingenuity redefines the thin margins between survival and defeat in humanity's darkest hours.